Welcome back to the Global Ledger. I'm Justin. Over the last few episodes, we've dismantled some persistent myths. We've talked about why interest rates sit on a floor, not a target, why Fed funds isn't the center of the system anymore, and why QE and QT are balance sheet operations, not stimulus. Today, we're going to connect all of that to something bigger, because if you step back far enough, you start to see that modern monetary policy isn't just about rates or balance sheets. It's about architecture, specifically how the system is designed to absorb stress before it becomes a crisis. That's what standing facilities are. And once you understand them, you realize something important has changed. And that is, stability is no longer improvised, it's pre-built. Let's get into it. Let's start simple, okay? What is a standing facility, okay? A standing facility is a permanent offer by the central bank to lend, borrow, or exchange assets at known terms on demand, not during emergencies, not after a meeting, and not after market panic. All the time. That's the key difference. Instead of waiting for stress to appear and then inventing tools, the system now posts rules in advance. If you show up with the right asset at the right counterparty level, you already know the price. That alone changes behavior. So the old world, you could say crisis as improv, right? So before 2008, stability worked very different. The system relied on reserve scarcity, interbank lending, and confidence that markets would self-correct. When stress appeared, however, the response was often slow and very uncertain, you could say. So facilities were opened after things broke. Terms were negotiated in real time. Stigma was, of course, very high, and participation was unclear. Okay, markets didn't know who would be supported, at what price, and for how long. That uncertainty made crises worse. So here's the shift to kind of permanent backstops. The post-crisis system flipped that logic. Instead of, we'll step in if things get bad, the system moved toward, here's the standing boundary of stability kind of thinking. So standing facilities do three things simultaneously. They cap downside risk in funding markets, they reduce the incentive to hoard liquidity, and they clarify where private risks ends and public backstops begin. That doesn't eliminate risk, okay, but it changes how risk propagates, okay? So the key standing facilities, and we'll conceptually, talk about this. Without getting lost in acronyms, the modern system includes a lending backstop for banks, okay? This is for if funding dries up, there is a known lender, okay? Also, a borrowing facility for cash-rich institutions, okay? So if rates fall too low, there is a known floor, okay? And lastly, a secured funding backstop for dealers. If collateral markets seize, there is a buyer of last resort, okay? Together, these facilities form rate boundaries, okay? Liquidity boundaries and collateral boundaries. Markets don't trade blindly anymore, okay? They trade within rails. And this is a big deal for markets, okay? This changes how markets behave even when nothing is happening. Because when participants know where the floor is, where the ceiling is, and what assets qualify, they don't need to panic preemptively, okay? Standing facilities reduce runs before they start. They compress volatility in funding markets and make stress more predictable. Crises don't just disappear, but they become more contained, more technical and really less chaotic. And I should clarify that this is not more control, okay? And this part matters because standing facilities are often misunderstood as tighter central planning or more intervention or a sign of fragility. In reality, they're closer to market design. They don't dictate prices really, everywhere. They set outer bounds. Okay, so inside those bounds, markets still negotiate, they allocate, and they price risk, right? So the goal isn't to eliminate failure, it's to prevent systemic failure. That's the key, okay? And how does this connect to everything so far? So now you see how the pieces fit. Interest on reserves, set a rate floor. Overnight facilities set a liquidity floor. Secured funding facilities set a collateral floor, right? QE and QT adjust balance sheets. The composition of those balance sheets. And Fed funds floats inside the structure, not above it. Okay, this is not accidental. It's a deliberately layered system. Okay, a system designed to be less fragile, more transparent, and less dependent on improv. Okay. So, of course, there's some trade-offs because there really, there always are some. Nothing comes free. Okay. Standing facilities also blur the line between public and private risk. Okay. They also reward institutions that can access them and shift more responsibility onto balance sheet management. They stabilize the system, but they also shape it. And that's a trade-off policymakers accepted after living through repeated breakdowns. I want to thank you for listening to episode 54 of the Global Ledger. We touched on standing facilities conceptually and made sure that we understood them clearly. Okay, so when you hear about standing facilities, don't think of them as emergency tools. Okay, think of them as guardrails or shock absorbers and load-bearing walls. They don't stop accidents. They really stop collapses. Okay, so in the next episode, we're going to be talking about something really interesting. And that's going to be episode 55. And we're going to talk about the discount window. And this is something I think banks hate, but they use it anyways. So that sums it up for episode 55 or episode 54, the Global Ledger, I should say. I'm Justin, and thanks for being here.